Who is Maurene Comey? Well, we did some deep diving, and I mean deep diving to look into exactly who this individual is. Most of us may know her as the daughter of James Comey. But when looking a little bit further up the family tree, we found some very, very interesting things. It was first brought to us that there was a possible link between her and a couple of very high profile cases that have been going on in the United States, two of which everybody should know, Mr. Epstein and Mr. Sean Combs. Now, the link seemed almost non-relatable. Sean Diddy ain't do what Epstein do, and Epstein ain't do what Sean Diddy do. So why would her affiliation with either case matter? Well, we're going to break down what we found. Now, I would have to ask your indulgence while I look upon my notes that I have before me. And so if you see me looking down for the long time, first time in a long time, I had to write stuff down because the brain ain't what it used to be. So bear with me as we try and break this apart. Now, we're going to be insinuating and sometimes espousing and asking you to go down some paths that most probably have not gone down yet. And we're not fully sure 100% that what we're knocking on the door on can be opened, but we're going to knock on the door anyway. So we're going to go back almost all the way back to 2004, 2005, 2006. During that time, it was the first time that Mr. Jeffrey Epstein was actually investigated for crimes against minors. But that's when he made his sweetheart deal under the help of Mr. Alan Dershowitz and the like. And ironically, there was one prosecutor down in Florida that seemed to almost make the case go sideways, seemingly intentionally. That person by the name of Barry Kircher. Now, if we look at his file and what he did, he associated the minors that were damaged by Mr. Epstein as streetwalkers, to say the least, prostitutes. So that the file was not going to be put forward as though he was violating kids, but like a John would serve if he had just done something that was akin to buying prostitution. Hence why the deal went through the way it did. So our thought was, what and who was he affiliated with? In comes the Comey family. While there's no, so far, direct tie to Barry and Mr. James Comey, there is one very specific tie, and that would be affiliations through his daughter, especially that on the end of having to do with the court system. Now, when we go over to what James Comey was doing around that time, he was involved in U.S. government as well as an assistant at the White House level. Okay, so now you have the state, you have the White House, and you have a free roaming child of Mr. James Comey. When looked upon, he was also dealing with another individual, Mr. Comey, that is, and friends with, affiliations with, and co workers with one, Mr. Robert Mueller. Now, you all remember Mr. Mueller from the investigations with the whole Russia thing. Well, they had been ties for a very, very long time. In fact, they both handed in their resignations to the post that they had in government around 2004 or 5. Ironically, 2005 was when the first whispers of Jeffrey Epstein's misdoings came about. Herein lies our conundrum. Because right about that time, dealing with everything in the high ends of government, Watergate and all that stuff, you come down now to this lower level and try to figure out how in the world did somebody manage to put such a taint on such a high profile case and was able to get away with it with no questions asked. The only way that could have possibly happened if he had no blowback, and of course, there was nothing up above that would hold him accountable. The only person up there would have been James Comey. Fast forward to when his daughter was placed on the next round of Epstein cases. You find it a little bit coincidental that he had possible ties to the last time it came around and was in a bigger set of office the last time it popped around, and now all of a sudden his daughter is involved in it. What happened next was a string of informational misinformations that you could not possibly even find on a Maury Poppet show. See, there was a judge that was put over the case, and she said, we're not going to send out this information of the names. This was in 2024, by the way. So we're going to hold on to it. We're going to actually redact these names so you can't have it. And the files were not unsealed. Now, the people thought at the time that maybe Maurene had a hand in that. But it almost went away because no later than that in July, it was unredacted. We got 147 names. Although the linchpin is there were about 20 or so names that were still redacted. And we had heard statements made that, hey, if you want your names to be removed from the public sphere about this, you have to submit certain types of paperwork. But oddly enough, that was after the names was released. So could it have been that the high profile people that are not mentioned on it, or at least really big ones, had already had their time to submit long before it came out to the public, which is why the initial filing says don't release, and no more than a month later, it was. What could have changed in that month? The only thing that could have changed in that month was somebody who did not want to be known got their chance to hide their names. So then we looked at this, and now all of a sudden, Miss Maurene finds herself in the middle of another big court case, that of Sean Diddy Combs. But on the surface, there's no connection. What does Diddy have to do with Epstein? And then it hit us. Like a Mack truck at Mach 20, hit us. Maybe, just maybe, the issue with Diddy is not what we think it is. Diddy is the fall guy. Now, we are not saying that Diddy didn't have anything to do with what he did. On the contrary, we akin him to Ghislaine Maxwell. You see, Ghislaine Maxwell had a lot to do with Epstein. In fact, she was the main accomplice to Epstein. But who actually served time? There was only one fall guy, and that was her. No other person served time. No one else was arrested. No one else was linked to Epstein's debauchery. Oddly enough, when you look at the case with Puffy, he's the only one named in the RICO, only one named in the trafficking. He's the only one really on trial. So, what is the link? The link is this: there may be people higher up that are linked to both people, both Epstein and to Diddy. And the same names that could be linked to Epstein are going to be linked to Diddy. Why? That's why she is in there, to secure, the same way she did with Epstein, certain times and parameters for people to have their names removed from public record. Now, remember, we had said before that quite possibly there were plea deals made, which is why no one had ever been accused of RICO, accused of this, accused that it was just Puffy, right? Everyone thought that kind of weird. And everyone thought that the case being brought forward seemed to have no merit when it comes to the RICO. They didn't talk about it. They weren't talking about anything like that. They talked about his character. They talk about the freak offs. They talk about one person, Cassie, and the rest of them are male prostitutes, right? Okay. We found it kind of weird that nobody on the big end, that he was a high roller. It wasn't like Diddy was moving in some small circuit down in Memphis and just kind of hanging out in dive bars. Diddy had big names attached to him. Where are they? If all of this was happening, why are their names not mentioned in it? Diddy goes a way back when people were still about to get big and blowing up, and he knew them before then and knew them after. He knew people during the time that Epstein was going through his mess, and he didn't get anything done to him then. Could the names that are at the top of this list that got their names redacted from the Epstein file are almost the same, if not the same, kinds of people that are linked to the Diddy case, and that is why Maurene was put there to do the same thing she did during the Epstein, have people get time, which is why they're delaying doing the kinds of things in this case that they were supposed to be done already. Certain people aren't being called, okay? Certain topics aren't being tackled. They're not really rushing to get to the drugs. They're not really rushing to get to the racketeering. They're not rushing to get to they're not getting to any of them, are they? No, they have been stuck for the last 3-4 weeks on salacious details that have really nothing to do with criminality. Why? Because you have to wait until when the criminality people that's linked to it have signed, done what they did, made their deal, have an adjustment with the judge to make sure that their names never get out into the public eye, and quite possibly are the same people that Miss Maurene got off the hook the first time, because they're all linked. Couple of names that have ties to the two of them, possible ties. I know people will say, well, you didn't have this name and you didn't have this name. Well, just bear with us. There have been multiple people tied to Jeffrey Epstein. We're going to name one very particular person, just one for now, one that had not only ties with Epstein, but really good friends with a certain individual by the name of Sean Puffy Combs. On her set, you could see some similarities with Little St. James Island and the color scheme, the design, the layout. And on the other hand, you see her talking and saying that we have film, we've been at parties. Okay, so you see, you have certain people that have ties between the two. That person being Ellen DeGeneres, of course. There are tons of them that just go poof, disappear. They're no longer here. Ironically, the same kinds of activity that happened during Epstein are happening now. The case is being brought to the public light for all the salacious reasons. That's exactly what happened with Epstein, wasn't it? We heard all the stories of what happened on the island. We heard all kinds of stories of what could possibly have been done or who he was. But nobody else was linked. Nobody. Now we find out that the one person that could have avoided both names of anyone coming forward would have been Maurene. Here is where our conspiracy goes completely up the chain to the left and then straight back up. The other person, the only other person that could have possibly had reasons for things like that to be hidden would have been James himself. It would have been James Comey. He was at both locations, both times in terms of time and space, not necessarily on St. James Island, although we don't know that. But he was involved in government in both times. And at both times, he had influence in the way the cases were going, whether by hand himself or by proxy. He pulled people from a multiple of places to do a whole lot of things. He got his daughter to do it. And here we have the same friendship with Mr. Mueller. They ended up having that whole Russia collusion thing. He's had his hand in everything. When Miss Clinton had to get out of trouble, who did they call? Him. He admitted on camera that this lady had done all kinds of things, and well, we just don't know if she did it knowingly. So let's ask the question, shall we? What else was on that server in her basement? What could have possibly been on that server? Don't forget her husband was pictured on Epstein Island in that blue dress. We believe that Benghazi thing was just a front. Yes, it was horrible, indeed. But what else was on that thing had more to do possibly with Epstein than anything else, which is why he can so boldly with his chest say she didn't have any intention of doing it. She may not have had intention, but I'm the one investigating and I know how to get rid of evidence. Go ahead and bleach bit that. We don't need nobody finding that. And if you do, we'll just say you didn't intend to and will be no charges filed against you. Everyone thought, why wouldn't he file charges? Quite possibly because he's the one in charge of all of the stuff going down. Y'all might think this might be a far stretch. Oh, I understand, because it hit us like, how? How, Sway? How? But the more we thought about it, the more speculation we had as to why Maurene would be the one person between the two and have her father be in certain positions every time this would happen. Fast forward to his tweet. All right. Now he goes on to some beach, some random beach. And there is 8647 just sitting on the beach. And he says, I didn't know what that was supposed to mean. Who was the only other person trying to get every name released? Now, I know people might say, well, that particular person's name might be on there, but it was an unredacted name in the list dropped back in the 147 we mentioned before. So it wasn't one of those names that was struggling to get pulled off the list. In fact, it was freely let go. Somebody in that 20 or so names has protections on them, either because they're still involved in something, they were at the head of it, or they're a bridge between the former Epstein and the current Diddy. And they're both acting in one particular place, the area of trafficking. Now, if we want to actually link another person into this, whose name might be, and I had mentioned her before with the bleach bit, the reason that could be is for her, what? Hubby. Now, remember, her hubby had a certain kind of activity at Mina Airport. Remember that with the whole drug running thing? If you want to go back into the annals of history, you can find a whole lot of things hidden with Mr. Clinton, not what relegated to not just MENA, but you go back to Haiti as well. There are tons of people that could have easily been at the forefront, not just artists. You're talking about politicians. And the best person to hide it would be ones who are at the helm of investigations. The only one that could have possibly been was James Comey. The only time he had a gap was after his second stint before he went into the Barack era and then finally fired by President Trump. And since then, he has been on a tear to say and do all kinds of interesting things, not limited to where his daughter ends up and who they protect. At the end of the day, since we don't have a full, robust answer to any of this, we just found it kind of odd the correlations between and the locations and what cases and who they know to be kind of suspicious. We found it very suspicious indeed. But many people point to higher ups and they were pointing to presidents. But what if the person that's really behind it isn't that high up at all, but the people that he had brought into he wants to protect? You find a way to do so. And if that means shutting down certain information being sent out, like in 2024 with the Epstein files, and giving your people and clientele time to get off the list, and then possibly having your daughter be slipped into a case, and now they're trying to make sure that the prosecution doesn't bring things too fast and too quickly to the front, and give your people time to get out of the way, and have Diddy do the downfall, just like they did Ghislaine Maxwell. This could be you're looking at an Epstein 2.0. Not necessarily with the same outcome for Jeffrey, but definitely the same outcome for Diddy when it comes to people like Maxwell. Jail time. And when he is fallen and he is out the way, no one will be the wiser. The enterprise, the idea will still go on, but one person would have taken the fall and people will stop talking. People just shut up. They won't be mentioning you anymore. They won't be talking about anything. Diddy was the bad guy. He took the fall. And again, yes, Diddy did what he did. The question we're asking is this: was he alone? And if he wasn't alone and he was able to do it for so long, there had to have been people higher up. Secondarily, if you have the mentions of drugs and all of that stuff in your case, but you have not brought an iota of it to the forefront to put this case away quickly, it tells me you are trying to hide somebody else. This might be why Diddy felt the need to take it all the way through court, not for the Cassie issue, not for any of that, but to try and relieve himself of the punishment that would be coming down on him as the fall guy. This might be why. He might be seeing the writing on the wall. They're about to burn me for the people that I knew. There are some bigger names involved here. And we do mean some big names, not, like I said, not just actors and musicians, but politicians. Have you heard any politician really speaking out about this? No. Why is that? They hung out with him. Their names are mentioned a few times in some of the cases that might possibly have known him. But not one at one time at all have they ever been brought into the case itself. The case right now that when we remember when that guy came first, Williams, I think was his name, the bald DA guy came forward and he started talking, laying out the case for Diddy, right? He emphasized a lot on the drugs and the baby oil and the drugs in the baby oil and the racketeering and the human trafficking across. He mentioned those specifically. Have they mentioned that yet? Now remember, he's guilty, right? That's what they were trying to get. He's guilty. We found all this. We found it. We raided offices, found everything, but they've not been brought up in the courtroom. In fact, it's just the Star or the Inquirer all day long. This is why we're saying this is happening. There are a few select people, maybe the same 20, who were involved in Jeffrey Epstein's case, who got time to redact their names, are doing the same thing because they have similar ties with Diddy. Whether that be by making sure that he was procured the things he wanted, he was facilitating them with something, he was handling business for them, or they were just directly involved in all of the things he was doing. That's who Maurene might possibly be. But at the top of this line is her father. It would possibly explain why that 8647 thing popped out of his tweet, hoping that what was trying to be released could put some kind of a fear over people to not release it. Don't know, just saying. Speculations all day long, but that's all we have at this point. And like we've said before, speculation can lead to investigation, and investigation can lead to finding a crime. We just found the timeline odd. We found the people that he knew odd. We found the people that were around, and especially the way Epstein got off the first time was ridiculously odd. Oddly enough, with this one, for all the things that they talk about, Diddy's not facing any of the cases right now out loud, any of the charges that would bring him directly to prison right off the top, and all the people as well. Corey said it before, and I'll say it again. This RICO thing with him not being charged with multiple people means that somebody either took a Proffer 11 or they struck some sort of a deal with the DA. The question now is just suppose, the DA had already filed those particular safety guards for the people that were doing the wrong, and they had already planned beforehand that Diddy was going to be the fall guy. I guess time will tell when we start seeing and questioning who it was that was involved with him. See if any names drop. If they have no names, then we have our answer. Because there's only one person involved in both of them, and they have one person higher up that could have had any influence over the blanket network that happened. And that would be James Comey.